Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp. And those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Two Western premiers unite on resource development. Can Ottawa deliver? This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Deeper than the headlines.
The answers you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
A summit of a different kind. World leaders have left Kananaskis, but Alberta Premier Danielle Smith and Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe just had a mini summit of their own. They met in Lloydminster to talk about working together on energy and agriculture. And of course, pipelines came up, this time in the context of the recent G7 summit, which emphasized the importance of critical minerals, but also pushed the need to promote energy security. Alberta Premier Danielle Smith said she's encouraged by what she sees as important conversations happening across the country about getting Canada's natural resources to new markets.
When I look at the potential of developing out our port system and the critical minerals that will be going through them, I think the best opportunity is to have a good anchor tenant, and that anchor tenant is oil and gas, because oil and gas shows up in high volumes, day after day, year after year, 365 days a year. It allows for us to be able to create the activity at the port and justify the expansion of all of the roads to get there, whether it's a pipe or a road or a rail line. So to me, that is a good conversation to have. One of the reasons we've been focused so much on a bitumen pipeline going to the Northwest Coast, likely Prince Rupert, is because I think Prince Rupert offers us the best gateway to get to the Asian markets, 8 to 10 days. If we can build spur lines up into Whitehorse through the ring of the triangle, the Golden Triangle that BC wants to develop 6 or 7 mines, through to Hay River, all the way to the Ring of Fire in Ontario, then that becomes, I think, something that benefits every single province as well as territories.
Premier Moe largely agreed with Premier Smith and added that if Prime Minister Carney wants Canada to really have the strongest economy in the G7, Western Canada has an important role to play.
Canada becoming a global energy superpower or provider of a global energy provider to allied nations around the world. What we need for that to happen is a slight alteration, as suggested by Premier Smith and myself, in the regulatory environment that we have, so that all of those projects can come on regardless of the product that they are producing, and to have the surety of that port-to-port corridor so that those markets can get to Tidewater, a Canadian port. And we are Canadian provinces, and so we do expect that we'll have access to those ports for the products that we are developing in our respective provinces. And so this is an opportunity that I would say is unlike any opportunity that I've seen in my lifetime for each of us as Canadians. And I'm very hopeful and excited on where this conversation will go in the next number of months.
Well, the Saskatchewan and Alberta leaders are sounding hopeful about the potential for more resource development in their provinces. In Ottawa, the Carney government is moving heaven and earth and staying up late to try and pass Bill C-5. That's the Projects in the National Interest Bill. It's facing a lot of opposition, but it is on the fast track. Could pass as soon as tomorrow. There was a 9-hour committee meeting last night, went well past midnight. Prime Minister Carney's point person on the bill is Dominic LeBlanc, who wears many hats these days, including being the Minister of One Canadian Economy.
It's not about lowering everybody's standards to the lowest common denominator. It's about eliminating duplication and overlap and making because nothing in this legislation affects the jurisdiction of provinces, of course, but it would allow proponents to benefit, again, from a basic principle that makes economic sense, We think it can make environmental sense as well in terms of allowing them to have the certainty that when a project is submitted, there is a coherent, non-duplicative review process. So the Prime Minister's instructions to us have been clear. Within 6 months, he wants us to come to cooperation agreements with all the provinces and territories. And frankly, to build on many of the best practices, provinces and territories have been doing great work in this regard for a long time. If there's a way to ensure that there are comparable federal standards to a province doing the work or vice versa, what an opportunity to assist proponents in arriving at a more coherent and cost-effective process.
The Conservatives on this committee want to know what sort of projects the government is thinking about and whether it can even name one project that's actually in the national interest. This is Conservative MP Shannon Stubb putting those questions to Dominic LeBlanc.
A single energy project, for example, that will be approved and ready for shovels in the ground in June 2027 if this law passes by this week.
So, Mr. Chair, through you, Ms. Stubbs, very good question. Obviously, we don't want to prejudge whether Parliament will adopt this legislation. We're hopeful. And then we're also hopeful based on, I sat Monday night and had dinner at a table with the Premier of Alberta and had a long conversation with the Premier of Saskatchewan. They are very enthusiastic about putting quickly before the Government of Canada projects that in their view and probably in our view would meet the national interest test. So I think we're going to be very fortunate by the volume of projects that will come together quickly. But, and I think this is instructive, this isn't a federal infrastructure program as much as it's a way to expedite projects that provinces and territories, Indigenous partners, private sector proponents will want us to work on in an expedited, effective way that encourages investment decisions.
And all of that will sound great to some, but not all. Some Indigenous leaders are opposed to this bill, saying it tramples all over their treaty rights. Sheldon Sunshine is the chief of the Sturgeon Lake Cree Nation in northwestern Alberta.
The rate that this legislation has gone through Parliament is unprecedented. There are no House studies. The House has no studies, has not heard from experts, has not weighed evidence. Now we're in fast-track committee. Crown obligations to First Nation can't be fast-tracked. This is why, as drafted, this legislation will only cause delay on regulatory uncertainty and litigation. The first issue with this bill is absence of consultation. Canada is legally bound by the principle of free, prior, and informed consent, FPIC. FPIC is more than an FYI. But we have not even received an FYI with this legislation. We received a notice from a corporate entity while the Prime Minister met with premiers and industry executives. Now we learn in a newspaper that there is a plan for an advisory committee to manufacture consent and to again exclude the rights holding First Nations.
This bill is expected to pass by tomorrow, and it's going to pass because enough Conservative MPs will join with the Liberals to support it. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio.
He's my friend on the right side of things. Michael Taube is with us once more, syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Great to hear from you.
Hey, how are you doing today?
Just great, Michael. Thank you so much. I want to talk about some of the headlines recently about Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party. Not so great. Mark Carney's approval rating is at 67%.
Mm-hmm.
Conservative support down to 32%, according to Nanos research. That's like a big round trip back to the Aaron O'Toole days of the Conservative Party of Canada. I'm even hearing from Conservative callers to my show during Talkback. They like the job Mark Carney is doing. They're willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. Meantime, you have Pierre Poilievre. He doesn't have a seat in the House. He's going to spend some summer campaigning in a by-election in Alberta. And here's what I've heard. I'm not saying I buy this, but I've heard this. Pierre Poilievre is yesterday's man, and he'll never defeat Mark Carney in an election. What would you say to that?
It's nonsense as usual, and it's another example of Conservative frustration at a election result that did not go well. And I'm not defending it; it didn't go well, but I think that unfortunately a lot of them are just getting antsy at the situation, and correctly, they look at it and say, well, look, Justin Trudeau won 3 elections, Mark Carney won a 4th. Yes, of those 4 elections, only one was a majority, and that being the first one in 2015, but that the Liberals are consistently winning government. Now, again, and it's not an excuse, you have to be realistic about it. I've written it, and others have written it. This past election, being this year's election, was not determined by the Conservatives or the Liberals. It was determined by U.S. President Donald Trump and his threat of tariffs. That is really what did it. And anyone can say as much as they want, but they did, but the Conservatives didn't move enough. They didn't change their messaging. I used numerous examples, and others pointed out examples that showed they most certainly did, but no one was listening, Rob. And when you can't get people to listen to you, you can say that, well, that's a failing of the party, it's a failing of its comm staff. It's unfortunately the failing of the public to not sort of think more wisely on this issue, and they used emotions thinking about tariffs more than anything else. And yeah, look, I'm opposed to tariffs. Good Lord. I've written against it for many years. I've spoken against it for many years. Most people who are small C conservatives have written and spoken against it. But the general public, for some reason, thought that Mark Carney, because of his history as a central banker, was somehow going to be the golden light to deal with U.S. President Donald Trump, and no such thing has happened. If you even look at the G7, I think John Robson's column in the National Post today, actually, one of my colleagues there, I think said it out pretty well. Mark Carney just uses these light words, no talk, no action, no nothing, and Donald Trump just moves on and gets things done. He may disagree with the U.S. president, that's perfectly fine in a democracy, but the fact is that the two leaders are completely different. This is the person, Rob, people voted in thinking that he was going to do something different with Donald Trump. And sure, there is some discussion of an economic and security deal in the works.
Right.
They have 30 days to determine it. That's all perfectly fine. But that has more to do with the fact that Justin Trudeau is no longer part of the equation versus Mark Carney. As I wrote, Donald Trump sees Mark Carney as the same sort of weak, ineffective liberal leader that he prefers to handle. And that's why he was critical of Pierre Poilievre.
I guess what I'm asking is whatever Donald Trump thinks.
And for that reason, you had basically an electorate that was just conned into moving one way with no defining factor of a person and a political leader, Carney, who was a greenhorn. No political experience whatsoever.
Right.
People thought this was the great coming of someone.
But nevertheless, if I could just interrupt, Michael, please.
Yeah, go.
Please. It's Mark Carney with the 67% approval rating, and it's the Conservative Party that's down to 32% in the polls. And the suggestion is being made, Pierre Poilievre has a Mark Carney problem.
So what? It's there's not going to be another election for a while. These things are going to just have to play themselves out. You said it correctly. Poilievre is out of Parliament right now. There's a by-election coming at some point soon. Mark Carney has said there's going to be no games. I'm going to have the by-election quickly. So Poilievre should hopefully be back in the House of Commons by September because the Conservative Party's in flux. The numbers are different. And the fact that Canadians, 67% are approving it, and as you said, some Conservatives like it, well, you can easily con people. It's not that hard. If you have a good messaging system, you can do it. Mark Carney has done nothing that makes them represent conservative ideas, small c conservatism, anything, but people just buy it.
All right. Well, let's pick up on that. We'll pick up on that. Back with Michael Taube, syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. There have been some suggestions, Michael, that Mark Carney is not really a liberal. He's more of a progressive conservative Prime Minister. And that he's certainly taken a lot of conservative policies and has made them his own. You're a conservative, dyed-in-the-wool conservative. Is there anything that you like so far in the early days of Mark Carney's leadership? What would you say?
To be perfectly honest, and it's not spin, no, nothing.
No.
Other than the fact that he invited King Charles III to open Parliament. I thought that was actually an honorable thing to do. I think it's also was honorable, to be fair, and he's had a second one, that he's not going to play games, as he says, with Pierre Poilievre, and that there will be a by-election in Alberta quickly. Those are good things. I'm not disputing that, but that's not ideological. That's process. There is nothing, and I really mean this, that shows that Mark Carney is a conservative, progressive conservative, modern conservative, right-leaning conservative, left-leaning conservative, whatever you wish. Taking ideas from the conservatives doesn't make you a conservative. He also took ideas from the NDP too, and if you really look at his platform, both in the election and since becoming prime minister, there's not been a lot of originality. He's been taking from other parties, other ideas. Now, some people will say, well, that's the way you play politics, and yes, sometimes you do, but that's out of the Liberal playbook. That's what they do. They sit in the center and they pluck ideas that make sense to them that they can then spin in their own direction. And that's perfectly fine. That's how politics is played. But it doesn't mean that Carney is a conservative or a progressive conservative. Look at the spending plan that just came out. There's an easy one. $486.9 billion, which is similar to, yes, his predecessor, former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Enormous amounts of spending, and it doesn't even account for the $24 billion, roughly, that he promised during the election campaign. That would put it over $500 billion. That's $500 billion, Rob. This isn't conservatism. Conservatives, obviously, when they get into government, they lead, they have to spend money on programs. We know that. That's part of every party's mantra and every government's mantra. But, I mean, come on. This is not progressive conservatism, at least in the traditional sense. It certainly is what little of it remains in the modern sense. It's liberalism. That's what it is. He's a left-leaning liberal, similar to Justin Trudeau. But, of course, there are differences. Carney is brighter. He's craftier. He knows what he's doing far more than Trudeau does. But that does not make him a conservative of any sort.
Okay, what could he do to show some conservative stripes, in your opinion?
I don't know. I don't think that the Liberal Party today really represents much of that. There have obviously been business liberals at the helm. To be fair, I think Paul Martin would certainly qualify in that category. He didn't necessarily govern like a business liberal or sort of a right-of-center liberal, but I think that's really where he primarily sat on the political spectrum for the most part. I don't think it's natural for Carney to do that. If you look at what he has said, what he has written, the books he's produced, etc., there's nothing there that represents progressive conservatism, small c conservatism, or anything. Now, I mean, the only thing he will do, and I think he'll continue to do it, as we've seen, is that he'll continue to pluck conservative ideas that make sense to him, but he'll also pluck NDP ideas and maybe ideas from other parties as well. If you see something from the Greens, as small as they are federally, maybe he'll take something from them too. That's what Liberals typically do, and there's nothing wrong with it because that's their strategy. But it doesn't mean that suddenly Mark Carney should be seen as some sort of a conservative thinker. He's not, and he has no history of it.
Okay, great discussion this week. Great to hear from you. We'll speak soon.
You betcha. Take good care.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Michael. Michael Taube, syndicated columnist and speechwriter for former Prime Minister Stephen Harper.
The Newsday Panel.
Let's jump into it. It's our Newsday Panel with Neil Brody, longtime conservative strategist and commentator. Hi, Neil.
Good afternoon, Rob.
Yeah, great to hear from you, along with Deirdre Tyndale, Vice President at Crestview Strategy. Hi there, Deirdre. Welcome back.
Hello, thank you. And hey, Neil.
Good afternoon, Deirdre.
Yeah, it's great to hear from everybody today. I want to talk about Bill C-5, about projects in the national interest. I mean, there's really two parts to this. You have the first part, which is about Free Trade by Canada Day and the federal government's role in trying to deliver that. And the second part is all about projects in the national interest, and that's what's getting all the pushback. But nevertheless, the government has put this on the fast track, and it really does look as though without much trouble, it's going to pass through the House of Commons by the end of the week. What do you think about the government's decision to fast track this legislation and the Conservatives helping to move it along? Neil Brody?
Well, as you said, Rob, this piece of legislation had to be fast-tracked through based on Mark Carney's promise to remove federal barriers to interprovincial trade by Canada Day. And it plays into Mark Carney's assertion that somehow the results of this last election gave him a mandate for big change and big change fast. But as you know, as this piece of legislation, whisked its way through the parliamentary process, we are seeing that there are some splits, even in Mr. Carney's own caucus. Karina Gould, who used to be a minister and is not a minister anymore, came out yesterday or 2 days ago, I forget what it was, saying that more review has to be done. This should be done in a more thoughtful manner. We're seeing members of Indigenous groups coming out asking for more study of the bill because they're not too sure how it's going to impact them. And these really are the risks of running legislation through the parliamentary process without any discussion at all. And as to Conservative support, I mean, they have to support cutting down trade barriers within the provinces. But, if enacting this legislation brings worsening relations between Mark Carney and his caucus, between Mark Carney and Indigenous groups, between Mark Carney and the radical left environmental organizations that support the Liberal Party, well, that's net benefit for the Conservatives. So we'll see how this all plays out over the next few days.
Okay, so just a quick comment, because if it's going to pass, it's because the Conservatives will support it. What do you think about the Conservatives helping to move it along, Neil?
Well, if moving it along brings pain for Mark Carney, I think that's a good thing. Conservatives can't stand in the way of reducing trade barriers between provinces. That's been one of their brands. It was tried not successfully, but tried during the Harper years. So they have to be behind it. But if bringing it through quickly means pain for Mark Carney with caucus members, with Indigenous groups, with environmental groups, that's kind of a net positive for the Conservatives.
Okay. What do you think of the government's decision to put this on the fast track, Deidre?
Well, in terms of the Conservatives voting for it, I think if we acknowledge the fact that it was inspired by commitments from both Liberals and Conservatives, then that makes sense. Look, I think it's great to fast track major projects, certainly, because this has been something that has been discussed in Canada for far too long. And I think the wording in the G7 statement about the Critical Minerals Action Plan a few days ago clearly highlights the fact that there are countries, unnamed of course, in that statement, that are well ahead of the game in terms of where we need to be on things like critical minerals. So I think we need to be absolutely looking to fast track, but I guess what I also want to see action on is the 450 plus projects that are also at some stage of the Impact Assessment Act currently, because it's great to talk about major infrastructure projects, but we need mines to come online. We need processing capability in this country. And then we need product either to be stockpiled here, such as other countries are doing, or we need it to be getting to market, because that's what's going to generate the jobs, the economic flow-on effects, and make our economy stronger and ultimately make us resilient. So I think this is, to use that old phrase, a good first step. But I actually think the major projects are not the only thing that we need to be focused on.
I mean, do you think that with putting this on the fast track and getting it done so fast, Mark Carney could be flirting with a crisis of his own making? And I'm thinking about the threats that we're hearing about the threats of blockades and protests from Indigenous groups. I mean, Doug Ford is going to confront, quite likely, the same thing over his Bill 5 in Ontario, which is a very similar bill having mostly to do with economic zones and the Ring of Fire. I mean, people are predicting a hot summer of protests, and I wonder how, if that comes to pass, how Mr. Carney will deal with that, whether he even sees that coming. What do you think, Deidre?
Well, having worked in Jim Prentice's office when we were dealing with the Caledonia blockades, I certainly have a real sense of what that could be like and feel like, and what it would mean to be dealing with it on a daily basis. I suspect the Liberals did not fully calculate this well in terms of the Indigenous consultation and engagement piece. But that said, Bill C-5 actually puts Indigenous consultation and engagement at the forefront. So it is different to the Ontario Bill 5, and how unfortunate that they both have the same number. But there is a differentiation, and there is an acknowledgement for the Crown's duty to consult. What I think they probably need to acknowledge is any major proponent going into even just explore for the first time is required to start that engagement from day one. Many of the provincial legislations with respect to mining and exploration have that as a requirement already. So there's no reason why the Crown's consultation could not essentially start at the same time, so that there is full engagement happening with both proponent, Indigenous communities, and representatives of the Crown to ensure that everything that should be done with respect to treaties and the like is being done. So I do think it's going to require them to probably give another think. I don't know now if we're ultimately going to see either Ford or Carney walk back slightly and say, you know what, we're going to take a pause and we're going to rethink this and open up some kind of engagement or consultation process. Yeah, well, certainly not from Ford. We haven't probably heard the last of it from Carney, but as I said, there are ways that they could show that they're committed to this and in a very real and practical way.
Okay, I would like just maybe get a follow-up comment from you, Neil, on potential problems between the Carney government and in turn the Ford government in Ontario and Indigenous protesters. I mean, so far it looks like Mark Carney's mantra is like the old Facebook line, move fast and break things. I just wonder if they might end up breaking things that they didn't anticipate breaking and have things blow up in their face, i.e. blockades of railways and highways and whatnot. What do you think?
Well, we may unpack this a little bit later in another segment, but Mr. Carney's temperament that we've seen in the last let's call it 5 months since he became a public politician style person in Canada is that he does not suffer disagreement well. We saw during his Liberal leadership campaign, during the election campaign itself, that when reporters questioned him about ideas that he had and how he was going to bring them about, he got testy, he got short, he cut them off. Some media reports called him rude. I don't know if that's, we all have a different tolerance for that sort of thing. But if there are segments of this population that come out against him because he is, the government is him, he is the government so far, does he suffer those people and listen to them and acknowledge and try to change? You talked about that in the last segment. Or does he double down and dismiss them and sideline them and is short with them and doesn't recognize their concerns? That will be what I'm looking for as this rolls out over the summer into the fall, because certain members of certain groups, they need to be listened to.
Can I just actually add something there?
Yeah, sure thing.
Though?
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's remember that he has now announced that Michael Sabia is going to be the clerk of the Privy Council, who you might say has a similar temperament to Mr. Carney. His reputation precedes him. But his time at Hydro-Québec has been all about empowering Indigenous populations and working with local Indigenous groups on all of the projects that Hydro-Québec was envisaging. So, I do have to wonder whether Sabia could be kind of the alternative voice in Mark Carney's head on this matter, and whether that will see any type of change. Sabia is obviously not in Ottawa yet. He starts only next month. But I do have to wonder what his influence might do to this situation as a whole.
It was 10 years of Liberal policy that the most important relationship for the Liberal government was the relationship between Indigenous peoples and the Crown. So there's that to 10 years of one Liberal policy direction for Indigenous groups. And is that going to turn around under Mr. Carney?
But I would like to ask Deirdre, because that was a nice segue about Mark Carney's leadership style. I did want to talk about that. It's a big report in the Toronto Star all about this today. He has brusquely demanded better performance of political aides and senior public servants, including deputy ministers. Like you're pretty high up the food chain there. One was scolded for not having an immediate answer to a question Carney had and told to learn the file. Another was scolded for not having read in advance a document he handed to the Prime Minister without knowing its full content and import. Carney flatters Donald Trump and Modi and tries to anticipate and meet their needs in the name of comedy. He gets along well with most of the premiers, but sees little need to do the same with his own caucus. One of his first caucus meetings after winning the Liberal leadership, Carney didn't stay long or stick around to take pre-election pictures with his MPs, said one Liberal MP. Other sources tell the Star Carney has broken promises to MPs who expected to be named or renamed to cabinet. What do you think about what you're reading about the way he treats other people, Deirdre?
Well, it kind of sounds like some of the CEOs and senior leaders that I've encountered throughout my career.
Okay.
I think Carney appears to have chosen his inner circle, right? And that's who he's going to deal with. And I think, that was commented on pretty early on based on who was appointed where in cabinet. You think of somebody like Tim Hodgson, for example, who not only has taken on the resources portfolio, but is also chairing the Canada Build Cabinet Committee, right? So one of his close people. Now, let's remember where Carney has previously worked. And yes, he spent time in the public service, but he wasn't chairing a not-for-profit organization or a national charity, right? He's worked at Brookfield Asset Management. He's worked at Goldman Sachs, some of the highest performing companies in the world, where, they wouldn't suffer fools. They would expect people to show up on time to meetings, across their brief, and be dressed like adults, because we have heard that, towards the end of the Trudeau years, people were coming in to the office, not wearing things like a suit and tie, sitting on the floor instead of sitting at chairs, right? So I think Carney's professionalizing the Prime Minister's office in a way that, frankly, you would expect the highest office of a G7 nation to be. And certainly in Harper's PMO, people came to work in suits and ties, as did the ministerial offices.
Even you, Neil?
I wore a suit and tie every day. It was a fantastic time. But this Star article is written by Tonda McCharles, who I wouldn't label as a conservative-friendly, anti-liberal columnist. No. So to have Ms. McCharles, who's a great columnist and very knowledgeable and been around for a long time, seen many different styles of governing, that Ms. McCharles is writing this. Should cause people inside and outside of government to sit up and take notice. She wrote another article yesterday or 2 days ago where she mentions that Carney keeps a tight hold on who knows what in his government and who is allowed to speak about it. I might have paraphrased this earlier in today's show, but it's very much Louis XIV, the state is me. He is becoming the central figure of this government. And if you want something done, it's going to go through Mark Carney.
Yeah. Okay. Be right back. Well, tomorrow, that's going to be the end of the House of Commons, and federal politics will at least kind of fade into the background. It will be this summer recess, and people will be tuning out politics. But I'm hopelessly addicted to following politics. I'm sure you are as well, both of you. What is a political story worth following during the summer? I kind of have three on my list. I have the by-election. Poilievre by-election. I'm interested in these stories out of Toronto. John Tory comeback. Is there a possible John Tory comeback, even though the municipal election isn't until next fall in that city? And Francois Legault in Quebec, will he stay or will he go? Because things are pretty bleak for him right now. Those are three things that I'm kind of watching. What about you, Deirdre? What about you? What are you following?
So similar, I have Pierre Poilievre's summer tour in the lead up to the by-election. So I think this is where he'll be kind of road testing some new messaging. On the Quebec front, I'm probably less focused on Francois Legault and a bit more so on Pablo Rodriguez, who's been elected
the new
as
Liberal leader there.
Provincial Liberal leader. He's on a quest to improve his party's fortunes in the regions, which of course had been Francois Legault's party's domain. And then in the immediate short term, the clock is ticking now on the 30 days that we've given ourselves, along with the U.S., to arrive at a trade agreement. as was said by Trump and Carney the other day. So, of course, we'll be watching closely as to what comes out of that.
Yeah, it's a good one. What about you, Neil?
Yeah, I had 30-day trade agreement clock as well. I thought that was odd that politicians don't usually float timelines like that unless it means something. So that'll be interesting to see. But number one on my list, I had separation, both in Alberta and Quebec. Deirdre may know more about the political scene in Quebec than I do, but the last poll I saw was the separatist Parti Québécois rising in the polls there, and Daniel Smith will have to be two-stepping through Stampede and the rest of the summer trying to keep Alberta as part of the Confederation. And third on my list is similar to Deirdre's, but it's the Carney government communications over the summer, the Carney government branding. Calls went out yesterday to ministers' offices to feed in tour possibilities for ministers, to go do announcements, to go be part of roundtables. So there'll be a concerted effort, I think, over the summer months to put something in the shop window for the Carney government, hopefully other than just Carney.
Interesting. Great stuff. Okay, everybody. Thank you so much. We'll speak soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Neil Brody and Deirdre Tyndale. That's our Newsday panel for today. Talkback is coming up right after the news. I'm Rob Snow.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. And we have a big issue to talk about today. We're going to talk about MAID. Medical assistance in dying. MAID. Very straightforward question for you today. Should Canadians be allowed to give advance consent for MAID? What do you think? Should Canadians be allowed to give advanced consent for MAID? Yes or no? Why or why not? We know, look, it's not the happiest of topics, but it's an important topic. And a lot of times the news isn't all sunshine and lollipops, as you've noticed. And from time to time, we have to have these difficult conversations. And when you're talking about someone dying, that is the most difficult conversation of all. The reason we want to talk about this today is because just this week, another bill has been introduced in the Parliament. And this is what it aims to do. It aims to allow more Canadians to pre-plan for MAID by way of advanced consent. Give advanced consent to end their life with the help of a medical professional. And we simply want to know if that's something you support or if that's something you're against. And the phone lines are open right now. Our call-in line 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Because if this bill passes, it would be another major development in how MAID is regulated in Canada. And it's something that has its supporters and it's something that has its opponents. And one of the big supporters is Senator Pamela Wallin from Saskatchewan, the former broadcaster. In fact, it's her bill. She tried to get this passed before. Didn't go anywhere. And now she's trying again. And she gave a very emotional speech in the Senate this week on why she believes that this is an important thing to do. She was near tears at times. It's quite emotional if you happen to see it. The federal government, for its part, has been holding public consultations about this for the last year or so. The federal government has been talking with provincial authorities, healthcare professionals, legal professionals, disability advocates, religious organizations, and there's supposed to be a report about this sometime this year. There have been moves in this direction, allowing advanced consent in some circumstances. But the argument is it's still too restrictive. And people are suffering when they don't need to be suffering. Another reason the federal government has been exploring this, and another reason why there's legislation about it, proposed legislation, is because of what has happened in Quebec. In Quebec, the provincial legislature, the National Assembly, created its own law. And that law allows residents of Quebec to request MAID in advance if they are suffering from a serious and incurable illness or a severe physical impairment, even if their natural death is not imminent. And Senator Wallin wants the federal government to use the Quebec law as a national template. And if her bill were ever to pass, Canadians in other provinces would be afforded the same opportunities to arrange MAID in advance. But in order for that to happen, there would need to be an amendment to the criminal code. Because right now, under the current MAID law, advance consent can only be given if someone is already approved for MAID, natural death is reasonably foreseeable, and a person is at risk of losing capacity to consent before the MAID procedure. But as for any other advance requests, such as, if I'm ever diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I would like to access MAID before I lose the ability to give my consent, that's not allowed. And if MAID is ever performed without consent, a criminal act has occurred. With respect to the Quebec law, what the federal government has said so far is that it will respect the Quebec law and there wouldn't be any criminal prosecutions. Quebec, you can handle that on your own. Some have said, that's not good. We can't have circumstances where the criminal law is enforced in some parts of the country, but not enforced in other parts of the country because it's the criminal code of Canada. So that's another reason behind this move as well. Here's the big problem the advocates of this say they're trying to solve. Because the current law still requires, in many, many cases, the need to consent to MAID right up until the end, people who are suffering from illnesses like dementia, who would prefer MAID, say they can't access MAID because they eventually lose the capacity to consent. And so they are suffering and they shouldn't have to suffer. They say there's no reason why all of this shouldn't be sorted out well in advance so that when that time comes, when the end is near, a person can die with dignity and with their wishes fulfilled. And there will be a series of safeguards that will be part of this legislation to ensure that when the time comes, everything is done according to the wishes of the individual and within the confines of the law. But that means the law as it is currently written would have to change. We recognize this is a heavy-duty topic, but it's important. Families all across the country confront these kinds of questions every day. How do we want to leave this world? This legislation aims to add more clarity to how that question can be answered and give all Canadians the option of planning things in advance, should that be allowed. And Rob up first today. Hi, Rob.
Hi, how
Rob.
are you today?
I'm good, Rob. How are you? Good to hear from you.
Fine.
What do you think, Rob?
I'm for this, definitely for this. And I don't know, this is going to test your memory as well as mine. I'm 80. There was a fellow, Sinclair. He was on a TV, black and white, radio show where there was a panel, and I forget what they call it. But
maybe front page challenge or something like that. Or...
Front page challenge. I think you're right. Now this goes back years, and he passed with a heart condition, and there was a little bit of an uproar that they didn't do everything possible to keep him alive, and the family came forward and said this were his wishes. He didn't want to basically be where he'd end up if they had have kept him alive. and it was quite a kerfuffle about it. I mean, this is back 40, 50 years.
Right. Okay.
But I agree with that.
You do. Okay.
We don't know where we're heading, and I'm 80. I'm quite fine. I can drive. I can do everything I did. But if tomorrow I got in an accident, say, or had some unknown cancer condition that I would end up a vegetable in the hospital for the next 5 years, I don't want to be there.
Okay.
I would rather have a stroke today and die walking into the superstore getting my groceries.
Right.
Than
Fair enough.
live like that. And I've had family members. So that's what I'm saying is that, you have a family, you tell them what you want, but will they, follow through on your wishes not to become that person in an old folks home for the next 3 years in diapers, and somebody has to lift you out of bed and everything else.
Right. But you think that we should reach the stage when it comes to MAID that it should become a normal part of planning for your end of life. The same way the advocates are saying, the same way you would prepare, your will and arrange your estate and everything else. Like, is that how you view it?
Yes, and I don't want to put that burden on my children.
Fair enough.
They pull the plug. I want to have that plug already ready to be pulled, but it's my decision and not put the burden on them.
Gotcha. Thank you, Rob. You've got us off to a good start today. I appreciate the call. Trish up next. Hi, Trish. Thanks for calling. What are your opinions on pre-planning for MAID?
Hi, Rob. Thanks. First-time caller, long-time listener.
I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I don't
Absolutely.
believe that 100%. I'm a paramedic, so I have seen nobody plans to need an ambulance, okay? Nobody plans for things to happen, but people end up in hospital, people end up disabled. But the ones I'm thinking about, cancer, for example, you're terminal, you have it all together, you still have to be able to consent, yes, I want to go now. Now, if all of a sudden that morphine or the whatever, narcotic, puts you where you're not right, they go, well, they can't make an informed decision, so no. And now that person doesn't get what they've already decided on. So the Quebec, say, outline there would be better to have it nationally. That way I know what I want, whether it happens in a week or a year from now, when I get to that point where I'm going to be total care and I'm not all there, I want to go away. I don't have family. I don't have kids. I'm a full-body donor. My brain goes to the Boston University for the CTE just due to my number of concussions. There could be some point that I end up with those symptoms.
Right. Okay.
And I can't make that decision. I want my friends and my friends to know that have my life directive that they can do this and not put it on, your medical team. Who all of a sudden
So what is envisioned and what is in the Quebec legislation is they call it triggering conditions. Okay. In other words, I reach this state. These are the triggering conditions, the symptoms, whatever. Right. And it's all in a written declaration. Okay. And now once you reach those triggering conditions, then the MAID procedure could happen and you would be okay with something like that.
Yes. Yeah. And I think one of the hiccups or hang-ups that's going to come are for our people with our mental health, right? Those who,
well, that's one of the next big debates that will happen on this. Yeah. I don't want to get too sidetracked. I really want to focus today. I want to keep it very narrowly focused today on this. Where are we right now in public opinion on openness to being able to pre-plan MAID, as I told the previous caller, just the same way you would settle your estate affairs or your will, whatever, right?
All part of your will, your funeral, your everything.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Thank you for your call, Trish. So a couple of lines available there right now. Paul in Cambridge up next. Hi, Paul.
How are you doing today?
Good, Paul. Thank you. How are you?
Oh, still vertical. Major
That's good.
accomplishment some days.
I hear you.
I'm 100% in favor of being able to pre-plan. Just like you say, planning your estate. One of the things I look at is if I choose this option, I'm going to look at financially. January 1st to be better than December 31st because of tax implications. I'm a realist. I know that my end is near. I also know the other night I ended up in the ER department. I thought the end was right there or very close. I thought it was a stroke. It turned out it wasn't. But I know what my deadline is. Okay. If I had a stroke or something, that would leave me mentally incompetent to make that decision. I should be able to go and file the paperwork, and no government has any right to interfere with that. And a couple of years ago, I had an old dog, and I looked at him, and I could see his time was near.
Right.
I could have gone through extraordinary efforts and held on to him for a little while longer, but I took him to the vets, and I did what had to be done. 10 years ago, I took a leave of absence from work, and I stayed with my wife and sat with her until she died. And she stayed at home right to the very end. And at that time, there was nothing else we could do. I don't want to be in that position. I don't want to leave my kids in that position.
Right.
Like I say, I know
you want to be able to set it up all in advance, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. I want to. I don't want somebody else making that decision. I don't want to put that pressure on my kids or anything like that. And like I say, financially, when the time is right, I'll look at should I wait another month or should I do it now? I want to use a common sense approach to it. And like I said, no government has a right to decide my fate.
Okay. Thank you, Paul. Thank you. We're going to start a conversation with Julia. And Julia, if we don't have time to finish in this, I'll bring you back on after the news, if that's okay with you.
Yeah,
okay.
For sure.
Hi, Julia. What do you think?
I'm a long-time listener. Thanks for starting this up. I listened to you during COVID. It was really great. Thank you for all your information.
Thank you.
I'm a nurse in Calgary, and I mean, the end of life after a stroke, these are the main things that are going to happen to these people that are registering for this or clicking the tick box on their thing. They're going to have a stroke and they're not going to be functional, or something they can't talk about, and they're in bed and in the system of our healthcare system where they're just we're just really just feeding them through tubes and going to the bathroom, and that's their life cycle. And I don't know anyone that would want that. And seeing people, even I worked in a small town, from these were adults that raised me, to becoming those people. If anyone had the choice, they would make it. Right. And it's tough that the government shouldn't really have that regulation on it. You should be able to have that option. And then when you get to these situations, it's not like they're just going to go, oh, okay, we know they're not coming out of this, we're just doing MAID tomorrow. Haha, family. The family's still going to be there. If there is the support people that are in that family and group, it's still going to be a discussion, and it's still going to it's not going to happen tomorrow, and families will either understand or they'll argue it, and that happens with everything. And
okay, we're going to stop here. You can hang on, and I'll bring you back on, or we'll wrap it up. It'll be your choice, and maybe we connect after the news. This is News Radio. Julia's still with us. Julia, some closing thoughts from you, please, on this.
I mean, I was going to actually take my time and go even further into it just to bring the dynamic out. But if I don't have that much time, I'm just going to say it really just shouldn't be up to the government in having the regulation on this at all. I mean, it should be up to families and what they want. And I mean, the dementia thing, I don't know if I fully agree with that, if they're still functional in their everyday ADLs, because there are very happy and enjoyable people with dementia that maybe don't know what day-to-day life is, and I can attest to this as family members, but that's a tough one for me. But if this is somebody who's a stroke, and they've again, like, I want to put this into perspective for people, because people who aren't in the hospital don't know what it's like, or have never had a family member who's had a huge cognitive event like a stroke. Like, this is not like only a burden on the families. This is like the entire healthcare system in general. And these people are either like they're being roofless, and 3 nurses, and we still want to keep them active in daily activities. So and so do their families. So we're lifting them up into chairs and rolling them out to eat with us, but then we're just injecting food into their belly and then bringing them back to their rooms, and they have pressure sores up and down their backs, and they turn necrotic, and we're painting them with betadine, and like, their families are like trying to visit them every week or month, but that peters out. And like, why are we doing that to people? And that's our healthcare system. Like, every single building
and if somebody
Calgary
didn't want to, and if somebody, I'm sorry, Julian, if somebody didn't want to live that way, but wasn't able to give the advanced consent, would they really want to live that way? What if they were able to give
every of them?
Yeah, exactly.
Every single one of them.
Julian. Gotcha.
Like,
Thank you. Thank you. I've got to move along now. Thank you. Yeah, you've made your point very well. Thank you. To Dorothy up next. Dorothy's calling from Waterloo. You're on the air, Dorothy. What do you think about this?
Well, good afternoon, Rob, and thank you very much for bringing this to the forefront, because there are hundreds of thousands of us super seniors, I mean old people, who are very concerned about this. I'm just going to give you a quick example.
Sure.
My husband of 70 years was dying a few years ago, and I kept him home as long as I could. Finally, it got to the point where, due to pain, this was during COVID, by the way, so I couldn't get any assistance at home at all. And so finally, he agreed that he should go to the hospital. As soon as we got in the hospital, within hours, I was told that he was dying, and that I had 2 choices: either let him die, put him in palliative care and let him die, or to insert a feeding tube, because he couldn't eat at that time, and keep him alive. Of course, knowing my husband, we'd already discussed this, so I chose to put him in palliative care. Well, they immediately took away his oxygen, all his food, all his water, and just left him there to die. It wasn't pleasant, as I sat by his side for several days, 5 days, watching him deteriorate and eventually die. Now, the problem with the advanced request is that there are so many people, I call them bleeding hearts or do-gooders, who have strong religious objections to this and have been objecting for, quite some period of time, because this has been actively pursued by MAID and by another group called Dying with Dignity. They've been blocked time and time again by people who say that it will be abused. I'm talking about advanced requests, that it will be abused and for people who are mentally challenged or mentally ill, and used against them, against their wishes, because they're not capable of giving consent. That is really a concern, and that has been stopping the advanced request consent bill from going through. And I'm afraid that may happen this time, because you're going to have all kinds of religious groups and all kinds of bleeding heart people who think they're doing the right thing, but are not, because they're forcing a large number of us really old people who want to be able to give our advanced consent. And of course, it will be done under strict parameters. We would have to decide at what point in our life we could engage the services of MAID. That would have to be clearly stated, as it should be.
Yes.
So the legislation is good, and I hope to God it's passed.
You do.
Because I'm going to need it sooner rather than later. I'm perfectly all right now. I'm still functioning on my own. I'm capable. But as some of your previous callers have said, I could have a stroke tomorrow and be incapacitated, both mentally and physically. Then I cannot give consent. I want this through as quickly as possible, this bill passed. If Quebec can do it and get away with it, then why can't the rest of us have the choice of how we die? Many of us, I know, including myself, have a backup plan for suicide because we feel so strongly that we don't want to end up in a nursing home in diapers, as it's been said before, mentally incapacitated, not knowing who we are, our kids or anybody else. So give us this right, this human right. We don't keep horses alive. We don't keep our pets alive beyond their comfortable lifespan. So don't do it to humans. That's an inhuman attitude that we've had for so many years. At my age and in my location, I have been told by several doctors, including a specialist, that I have no hope in of getting a CT scan to determine if I have cancer, even though my family history shows has had a number of cancer cases. So you've
hit on all the hot issues there, Dorothy. The phone lines are very busy, so I just have to wrap up our conversation there because they're very busy. I want to be able to fit as many callers in today as we possibly can on this topic. I really appreciate your call. Sean is up next in Cambridge, Ontario. Hello, Sean.
Hi, good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good, Sean. What's your opinion, please?
I think I believe in pre-planning, and there should be triggering instances. I have several injuries now that leave me in quite a bit of pain, but you could have an accident, something that could happen to you that leaves you unable to consent to MAID, and I don't want to have to put my family in the position where they're left having to make that decision for me. And I don't want to live like where that earlier caller said, bed sores, having food forced into me, and basically it'd be like a living hell. I don't want to live like that.
Right. So you think you should be able to sit down, go through the process. If I reach, say, this state, these triggering conditions is actually what the language is in the legislation. These triggering conditions.
Yeah, I believe so. And also when they're talking about the discussion, the people, and quite honestly, when I heard some of the people that want to discuss this, like were religious groups, I object to that. Religious groups should have no say on what I have the ability to do because I don't believe in that stuff. So why should they have any say over what I have right to do, quite frankly?
Okay, fair enough, Sean. Fair enough, Sean. Thank you so much for your call today. Staying in that part of the country in Waterloo, Mike is up next. Hello, Mike.
Good afternoon. How are you?
I'm good, Mike. Yeah. What's your opinion, please?
I definitely think advance directives are something that is extremely important. Now, as to your previous caller there, I'm with him that the religious group stepping in, throwing their opinion at it, that's not my belief either. But I will say that here, in a country that we call ourselves a democracy, whether you want to fully believe that or not, everybody has a right for their opinion to be spoken, including some of these groups. And as much as I disagree with a lot of what they say, I think it's important that we hear every opinion before we move forward on this. Now, I agree that this needs to happen fast, and now I've got an uncle who's dying. I'm a caregiver, 37 years old, caregiver of a 58-year-old who's at the end of life. And, if we had this option, it would definitely have, I think, helped the situation. But now he's gone past the point where we could even, he can have that discussion. So I think the advance directives are definitely important.
Okay. Thank you for your opinion. That's Mike in Waterloo. In Calgary, again, Timothy. You're up next, Timothy. Share your opinion, please, on this one.
Yes, thanks so much, Rob. And I want to say thank you for your show. You in particular, you're one of the most level-headed people that I know. You listen to every side of the opinion, and it's a
kind
rare
of you.
gift.
All right. So what do you think?
I am one of those religious bigots, in a sense. But the reason I am saying that, because currently there's MAID, and it's fine the way it is. To expand it is walking a very dangerous line, because it can be hijacked by people with mental health issues. That is part of my problem. And thanks to Mike from Waterloo for what he said, because you might not agree with every opinion everybody has, but please listen to them and don't rush it. Finally, we don't want to use Quebec as a reference point for everything and anything, because I'm not happy with the federal government giving Quebec the right to do what they want to do. It's not okay. And then the rest of it, because now Alberta could come up and say, oh, on that issue of separation, why don't we just get a pass like Quebec has? So the point is, we want to be careful. We want to, MAID is fine the way it is. We don't need to expand it. It's just my opinion. But thank you for listening to everything.
Well, thank you, Timothy. Thank you. Just on the Quebec angle, because Quebec is allowing this now. One of the concerns is this really what we want to do in Canada? Just have this patchwork system of advance consent for MAID, and we can have some provinces acting beyond what the federal law permits? We can't have a country that operates like that, especially if it's supposed to be the criminal code of Canada. It's a good point that you raise. We'll be right back. Neil is in Halifax, Nova Scotia. Up next, Neil. Hello, Neil.
Hello, Rob. How are you today?
I'm very good, Neil. What's your opinion, please?
Good. Well, first of all, I am definitely in favor of advance consent, of course, made rationally. And I have to tell a very short story. In 2006, Mom was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. And in 2012, Mom was confined to a chair. Her eyes were closed. And the only stimulus she reacted to was a little bit of food on a spoon to her lips. That went on until 2015, 2.5 years later. I would love to know if somebody has a counter-argument to advance consent for MAID, considering that is certainly a possibility for any one of us.
May I ask you, Neil? Neil, are you still there, Neil? Yeah.
I am.
Did your mother know at the time that she was going to reach that state?
No, she definitely did not. But I'm sure if she was aware that that was a possibility, because my sister went to visit her every single day in Glace Bay, Nova Scotia, and was the person who lifted that spoon to her lips. And it was heartbreaking to see.
I bet it was.
So anyway, that's my story. And,
but I would like to ask you one more question. Just while I have you on the line, because this is the driving force behind Senator Wallin's bill, is the very scenario that you are outlining, sir. If this legal framework had been in place at that time, when your mother was first diagnosed with this, do you think that is something she would have considered?
I absolutely, even though she was a devout Catholic, I absolutely believe that she would have considered that, because she was also a caregiver in many ways and had seen people go through the similar circumstances. So therefore, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Neil. Yeah, very interesting call. Yeah, really interesting. Linda is in Halifax. Hi, Linda.
Hello.
Hi, Linda. You're on the air. What's your opinion on pre-planning for
Hi,
MAID?
Rob. Well, funny that you get 2 back-to-back calls from Halifax. I'm a first-time caller, so nice to get through. I have very, very strong feelings about this particular issue and have been an advocate for. I am now 68 years of age. I am a mental health professional. I believe in pre-planning the advanced strategy. And more importantly, no human being would ever make this decision lightly. This is a one-person stop shop. One person gets to choose how they want to say goodbye to their world. I feel so strongly, as you had the woman on earlier who was in her 90s, that she said that if she could not get MAID, that she has an alternate plan to choose suicide. I think that speaks volumes about how archaic our society has become, that it cannot accept an individual's cognitive choice to pre-plan their leaving of this earth with their loved ones around them. Why give them an exit where they are alone, possibly, and they had to choose this because they didn't want to be forced into an institution or what have you?
Right. Okay.
As your previous caller, I watched my own mother, who I lost 9 years ago. She was 92. There was nothing of my mother for the last 6 years of her life. A highly educated woman for those years to have gone to university and had a master's.
It's time to talk back
on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Call now
and have your say.
1-833-668-2577.
Welcome to hour number 2 of Talk Back. Heavy duty topic today. I love all of your opinions, by the way, and keep them coming at 1-833-668-2577. We've been asking if Canadians should be allowed to give advanced consent for MAID. One of the news hooks for this is a bill was introduced in the Senate for the second time by Senator Pam Wallen from Saskatchewan. Some of you may know her, a longtime broadcaster, and she is proposing an amendment to the criminal code that essentially mirrors legislation that already exists in one province and one province alone, and that's the province of Quebec, where they will allow residents to request MAID in advance if they are suffering from a serious and incurable illness, severe physical impairment, even if their natural death is not imminent. And Senator Wallen would like to use that as a national template and afford Canadians in every part of the country more opportunities to arrange for MAID in advance. Now, just before the news, we were speaking with Linda. Linda, you're still with us, Linda?
I'm doing my best, yeah.
Thank you, Linda. I'm sorry, they cut us both off. It's a pretty tight ship around here, as you can well imagine.
Top of the hour, I guess.
Yes. So, you were talking about your own mother, for example,
Right, Rob. My mom I lost 9 years ago, but I actually lost my mother 6.5 to 7 years ago. She was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and my mother had no language. She had no speech. She had no recognition. She had absolutely none. I would travel every month home to Cape Breton and visit her for 3 weeks, staying in her home and going back and forth to the care facility she was in. My mom had no idea. I'm a healthcare professional by training. She had no idea. My mother was a highly educated person. My mother, if she had been given the option, there is no doubt in my mind, she used to say to us 3 kids as we were growing up, if I ever get potty, and to that meant mom's mental acuity was no longer there, please get me gone. Those were her words. That's what she would have wanted, and I wish I could have let her go. I wish.
So again, I would ask you the same questions that I asked Neil before you. If this legal framework had been in place and was allowable at the time, is it something that you think your mother would have considered?
Without a doubt. My sister would have fought me tooth and nail because of her religious commitments, and that's fine for her. Let her make her decisions for her. Every person should have the right to make their own decision. No one should impart their feelings about what they would choose for themselves onto another human being. That is not right. That is not correct. The medical community may take an oath, and if people want their life sustained, please heroically do whatever you need to do. But if a person has chosen that they want to be let go, it is that person's choice. And if it could be done in advance, so be it. How wonderful. Then kids, families, loved ones don't have to have anything to do with it. I think about that 90-year-old woman you were speaking with earlier. She was saying that she has it in place, But if it can't happen, she has a backup plan for suicide. How sad that 96-year-old woman would die by herself. That is not a dignified death. She should be able to have the loved ones around her. I have been at two maids when I saw people go. It is the most beautiful thing. I also watched my mother go in a horrendous way, as well as my father. That's not dignified. It leaves an impression on people's minds like nothing else.
Okay. All right. I'm glad we could finish our conversation, Linda. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I thank you so much
Very
for the
good for you.
opportunity since I'm first-time caller. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Linda. You call back sometime. Audrey in Calgary up next on this topic. Hello, Audrey.
Hi.
Hi, Audrey. What's your opinion?
Oh, first-time caller. I couldn't say anything better than all your previous callers.
Okay.
I feel very strongly about this. I've been supporting Dying with Dignity for years to get them to get this put through. I'm perfectly healthy, but I've watched too many relatives. It's awful. It's just it's so undignified.
Okay.
Sorry.
Okay. No, I understand it. It can be an emotional topic for some people.
I have a 90-year-old aunt who said, it's nobody's business, and she's absolutely right. If you need to do this, I want it, and I think everybody has the right to have it. And I'll become a Quebec citizen if I have to.
Oh, really? Okay.
Well,
you should. Some would make the case that shouldn't be how it works. And if it's good in one province, then we're talking about this should be a national law, and you would back that then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I just had an aunt pass away in the end of January. It took her 6 days. It was awful. And my mother was in long-term care. It's terrible. And so many people they're not even visited, or there's no dignity in long-term care. It's just a prison. So, we need to, and we're all getting older. We're all boomers. It's time for us to pack it in when our time is near. Like, I don't want anybody putting me into long-term care. No, thank you. And I don't want to be anybody's burden.
Right. And you think it should be part of just the planning process for end of life, that we should try and normalize this.
Yeah.
I think
last time we met with our lawyer about our wills, I tried to get our lawyer to put it in, and he said I can get as close as I can with the law as it is now, but until we get what we're trying to work on here, there's no way. So if I can't do it through legally, like that elderly woman said, I got a backup plan. I'll have one too.
Okay. Yeah. Which would indicate it's going to happen one way or the other. So if it's an ineffective law, then maybe the law should be changed. What is the point of having a law if it's not an effective law? And people will find workarounds through the law. Yeah, very good. Okay. Thank you, Audrey. Sorry, Audrey. Yeah, we're going to have to run here. Thank you, though, for your call. 1-833-668-2577. Just one line available if you would like to join the discussion today. Jody up next in Calgary. Jody, you're on the air. What's your opinion?
Oh, hey, Rob. I was totally against MAID until my mother passed away in February. And she had like a terminal cancer. She was 78, and we were brought up in a strong Catholic family. So I'm totally for it, but it's got to be it's got to be all of Canada, not just Quebec. And I don't think it's shit. Like, I know people that have mental illness. That's a different story.
Yeah, and a conversation for another day. But you think you should have the capacity to pre-plan, get it all down on paper, make a written declaration. If I reach this state, I give permission to end my life. You think that you're okay with something like that?
Yes, I am. I mean, I wouldn't have been before my mother passed away in February, because I was, like I said, I was totally against it. Like, I'm Catholic, and I do have some beliefs. So, but now that's like what I've seen her go through, and what her diagnosis was. like I think I would be for it. But like I said, it's got to be all of Canada. Like why does Quebec always get like certain privileges?
Well, Quebec passed a law. Quebec passed a law. It wasn't happy with the federal law. It passed its own law, and I think it did that to. Yeah, I think it did that to try and kind of force the conversation a little bit, to move things ahead a little bit.
I'm for it because like the way I seen my mother, it was a terrible situation.
Okay, all right, Jody. Thank you. Good to hear from you today. And to John in Nova Scotia up next. John. Hi, John.
Hi, Rob. Good afternoon.
Hi, John. Your thoughts, please.
125% for it. It should, as many callers said, it should be my choice. Are you there, Rob?
I'm right here, John. Yeah.
Okay. I've sit beside mother and father when they passed away. My father was on life support. I was in the room, asked to come to the quiet room where the doctors could talk to the family. Being the oldest son, my mother turns to me after the doctor said, if we don't take him off life support now, we can keep him alive. However, he will be a vegetable if he survives. My mom said to me, John, what do you think we should do? Rob, I lived with that for the rest of my life. So I said, Mom, I know what Dad's wishes were.
Mm-hmm.
So he was taken off life support.
Right.
No family member should have to live with that.
Okay.
As far as the mental health, that's a totally different discussion. But why I have my mind, I want to make that decision. And like many other callers, if I'm not allowed to do that, I have taken other steps which don't want to do, but
sure.
I will look after things.
Okay. All right. Thank you, John. Yeah, it's a very common story that I'm hearing. From what I understand, I have read Senator Wallin's bill. I mean, it's not a long bill. It may be 2 pages long because it's essentially just an amendment to the criminal code on pre-planning for MAID. It would only be for those suffering from a serious, incurable disease, illness, or disability. You would put it down in writing. You would make a written declaration, and there would be what the advocates call these triggering conditions. In other words, if I reach this state, these are the triggering conditions. The written declaration would have to have witnesses. You would have to be assessed by 2 competent professionals. You would have to have the medical verification of your conditions. And Senator Wallin's bill envisions 5-year timeframes. Okay? So this written declaration be good for 5 years, but then you would have to renew it, and you could revoke it at any time. And if you had any last-minute thoughts or even a last moment of lucidity, and you express any kind of resistance to the MAID procedure at the last moment, then everything stops, of course, and there is no MAID procedure. My understanding, reading through her bill, is that that's basically how she envisions it happening.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talk Back on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
We've been asking you about your stance on pre-planning for MAID, medical assistance in dying. Just let me give you a little bit more information and why there is this call for this change and allowing more Canadians to do this. The case continues to be made that the way the current MAID law is written is flawed, even though it's been changed a couple of times in pretty big ways over the years. Because in some cases, the person must be able to consent at the very end. And that means there are people who should be able to access MAID, but they can't because there will come a time when they won't have the capacity to consent. This was highlighted by the Audrey Parker case. Some of you may remember that woman from Halifax. It was national news at the time. Had stage 4 breast cancer. It had metastasized to her bones and brain. And she applied for MAID. But because the original Maid law had this flaw requiring consent right up until the end, she feared she wouldn't be able to do that there would come a point where she wouldn't be lucid enough to do that. So she ended her life earlier than necessary with Maid. And the proponents say that's not right. She could have lived longer. And in fact, there was an amendment to the original Maid law. It removed that requirement that a person's natural death had to be reasonably foreseeable. That was the original language in the law. That, along with a major court case in Quebec involving 2 disabled Quebecers, created this 2-track system that we have now. There's what's known as track A for those whose death is reasonably foreseeable, and then you have track B for those whose death is not reasonably foreseeable. But one of the criticisms of the current framework is that it still restricts advance consent to only those who are already assessed and approved for Maid and whose death is reasonably foreseeable. And what Senator Wallin's bill aims to do is essentially narrow this 2-track system, allow more Canadians what she describes as the right to a planned and peaceful end of life. What do you think of that? Herman is in Calgary. Thanks for waiting, Herman. I know it's been a bit of a wait today. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, Herman. What's your opinion, Herman?
Well, Rob, I watched my dad die of cancer in 2016, and I mean that was a battle to the end. I mean he really, really got brutally sick was the last 2 weeks of his life. But at the same time, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and I was just listening to some of your calls today. They're pretty fucking tearjerkers. But
oh, sure, yeah.
I don't want anybody to go through that. My wife is 10 years younger than me, and there's a good chance I'm going that way. Everybody on my mom's side of the family that's exactly what they got. I want them to go on with their lives. They don't need to spend 8 years. It was 8 years that my mother was sick with it. And luckily I was living far away. I didn't really have to deal with it every day, but my sister did. And just watching her having to deal with it every single day and the toll it took on her, it's nobody needs to go through that. And I can't possibly agree more with this law. We should be able to make these decisions ahead of time. Doctors can put labels on it at different levels of the illness. But I've told my girls, when you come see me and I can't say your name or I don't remember you, it's time to go.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your call, Herman. Yeah, a very common opinion today. To Red Deer, Amy is in Red Deer. What's your opinion, Amy?
Hi there. I have a really strong opinion about this. I am 100% for this. My stepfather,
you are? Okay.
Yes, my stepfather was diagnosed with ALS, which actually turned out to be cancer. It was a misdiagnosis. And It was a bulbar onset. He wasn't able to eat. He wasn't able to speak. He was slowly failing. He was living a horrible life. And he made the decision to move forward with the MAID program, which of course changed because he was diagnosed with cancer. The end of his life with cancer was, it was hell. It was hell on him. It was hell on the family. Excuse my language. And not only did he suffer, but we suffered. The medical system suffered. And if he was in sound mind near the end, he would have signed that document. As easy as that sounds, it wasn't easy. And we put our dogs down when they're suffering.
Yeah, a number of people have mentioned that today. I do want to ask you, do you think if, again, and I've asked several people this, if the legal framework had been in place to allow your father to plan for these things, do you think he would have taken advantage of something like that?
1,000%.
1,000%. People are very convinced of that they.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. He told us that.
Okay.
Yeah. When he was diagnosed with ALS and he knew he had a limited time frame and no quality of life, he inquired about it and he wanted to go that route, except it was a big process. And, he called the lawyer and it ended up not happening because of it was a misdiagnosis. But had it not been, he wanted to move forward with doing that. He wasn't the type of man to live a life not being able to eat, walk, talk, or have a quality of life.
Yeah.
And that was his choice.
Yeah, when Senator Wallin was speaking in the Senate this week to this bill, she talked about it's not about quantity of life, how long your life is. It's about the quality of life. And that's what really matters to people, not the quantity of life. Living the longest life, but living the best life, right?
Right. Well, when there's no quality, what does quantity matter?
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, very interesting the way I think opinions are really shifting on this. MAID.
Yeah,
I mean,
I'm for it, but of course there needs to be some guidelines around it.
Oh yeah, absolutely, a very strict framework. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and the bill would aim to do that, of course. Thank you, Amy. Yeah, and sharing your story. Dawn is up next in Calgary. Hi, Dawn.
Hi.
Hi, Dawn. What are your opinions?
Well, I am very much in favor of it. I believe.
And why?
To me, it's almost like a backup to a do not resuscitate order. Many people have a DNR, but they don't carry it with them. So I know of quite a few where there has been an episode when they have not been at home where their green sleeve is with the instructions of do not resuscitate, do not do heroic measures, la, la, la. And they have been resuscitated and they have been brought back, end up in hospital, and now the do not resuscitate it's not valid because they've already gone past it. So I think the MAID would be a backstop to that.
Okay.
And I think that, listening to some of the callers, I don't know if some of the newcomers to Canada understand that it is an individual choice. It's not anything to do with the government taking control or doing anything. It's an individual choice. Within the legal framework, we could make the choice.
Yes.
And for the do-gooders, they can stay in their own lane. It has nothing to do with them. It's their choice. And everyone answers for their own individual actions.
Yeah. I mean, there have been, obviously, Catholic organizations, various dioceses and whatnot, they're against this. Evangelical Christian organizations, they're arguing the MAID, just the very idea that Canada has a MAID regime, that it violates the sanctity of life. You can appreciate that. That would be the church's opinion. Right, that should not come as any surprise. You're saying it should play no role. I can appreciate that as well, right?
Yeah, I mean it's like pro-life. It's it's the individual's choice, and we're supposed to live in a free country. We should have the ability to make the choice.
Yeah,
and if we can have the ability to have an order of do not resuscitate, isn't it kind of the same?
Isn't it kind of the same? Yeah. Another concern that has been raised is, okay, what you're really saying is you're handing over the control to somebody else. You're removing the direct consent to end your life. You're removing that from your own hands, and there's going to come a point where it's out of your hands because you have reached a state of such incapacity, and that kind of creates an ethical gap. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yes, but by then I wouldn't know the difference, so it wouldn't matter.
You would view that as yes. Okay.
Right? If I have made the moral choice that I want this to happen, and I know people that have, if I have made that moral choice that I want to have a medical assistance in death, in dying, that's my choice. And if I have gone physically beyond, then I'm there. So please pull the plug. Don't let me go.
Right.
It's an injection. Let me go.
You've gone through the steps. You've made the written declaration. You've met with all the professionals, the medical professionals, legal professionals, whatever that you're supposed to meet with. And the conditions have all been outlined. after that, it's set into motion.
Exactly.
Right? And you would always have the ability to revoke it at any time. Okay,
so
very interesting.
I have in my living will, I have that. I've gone even farther than that. I've gone, do not resuscitate, do not no feeding tube, no, if I cannot make any conscious communication. So I've gone into the details of it, but
yes.
I mean, at what point do they get to read that after they've already resuscitated me?
Okay.
And then
Thank
I
you,
end up
Dawn.
a vegetable, right?
Right, Dawn. Yeah. Okay. Very good. Dawn, thank you for your opinion today. Let's take one more in Nova Scotia. Tracy in Nova Scotia. Hello, Tracy.
Hi, Rob.
Hi, Tracy.
I'm 100% in favor of the pre-directive for MAID.
Okay. Why?
And you know what? For the last 33 years of my life, I took care of 6 of the people that were most important to me as their POA. And I watched them die slowly and miserably. And 95% of them, maybe one, wouldn't have agreed to the directive for MAID, but all of those others would. And it included my husband, who died at 46 from brain cancer, my father, my mother, my aunt, and dear aunt, and uncle and aunt. And I took care of them for the last 33 years of their life and saw them demise slowly in front of my eyes. And I was the one who spent all the time with them dying. So I have no children. And what's important to me is that somebody else doesn't have to do that for me.
Okay.
That's really important to me.
Right. You want all your affairs in order, and you view
Correct.
this as just a kind of a natural step in that? Is that fair enough?
Absolutely. And
okay.
And I will identify a POA and an executor through the legal process.
Yeah, sure.
But
yeah.
I don't want them to go through what I did for those 6
Yes.
people that meant so
As
much.
a caregiver. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Tracy. I'm glad we could fit your call in. We'll be right back. Diane is in Kitchener. Hello, Diane.
Hi. How you doing,
Hi,
Rob?
Diane. I'm good. Thank you, Diane. What's your opinion here?
I can tell you 100% because it's what we chose, my husband chose for himself. Like that other woman that called, my husband was diagnosed with bulbar onset ALS. And the difference between them and regular ALS paralyzes your body and then it paralyzes the rest. With bulbar onset, it paralyzes your swallowing and your breathing.
Yes.
So here is a man who is robust, lost 60 pounds because he couldn't eat. He's struggling to breathe. Like, it's just horrendous. Like, to see someone standing there struggling to breathe. So when he was in the hospital, he was given the choice. And I don't know, lucky isn't the word, fortunate. He was of sound mind. Okay. So he was able to say, yes, I need this because, he was getting shots every 4 hours just to keep him alive. And we had time for my family to come. We spent the night with him. And it was very peaceful. It was, he wasn't struggling anymore. It's not the easiest to sit there and watch your loved one pass away like that.
Oh no.
But what's the alternative? To keep him alive and getting like shots every 4 hours to keep him breathing, and then like within 2 hours he's struggling to breathe. Even if they had a cure instantly, it would never, he's past that point, right? It's like you said, it's the quality of, not quantity. I mean, sure, we could have kept it alive for another, 5 hours, 6 hours. It doesn't matter. The end was he was going to die, and he chose to die peacefully. So, and the
But
thing
the fact that
like,
he had already, like, he went through the approval process for MAID. He had a natural death that was reasonably foreseeable. He was at risk of losing capacity to consent before the procedure. So he would have qualified for advance consent. And you were saying you're glad that he had the ability to do that.
oh yeah, can you imagine like if for some reason like that other poor woman who ended up, you know, like he had cancer, but the thing is he was of sound mind. But if he happened to get ALS while he had dementia, you know, you're stuck. To me, like I'm the same way.
Yeah.
If I don't have a quality of life, what's the point? You know, I would rather, you know, end it.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for taking my call.
Well, thank you. Well, look, thank you to everybody today for opening up. That's a lot of powerful testimony over 2 hours. I would expect news on this sometime during the summer, certainly perhaps in the fall session of Parliament. We've been watching it from the very beginning and continue to follow any and all developments on that particular file. Latest breaking news is coming up next. Tomorrow, it's the Friday Free for All Talk Back. Hope you'll join us then. This is News Radio.